Eleonora pointed her blade at Tigre, as she declared that he would now be her subordinate. For context, Tigre was walking through a battlefield that he has just witnessed when a soldier attempted to assault him, but he swiftly shot him off his horse. As he looked around, Tigre spotted the war maiden Eleonora Viltaria, or Ellen, being escorted by some knights. Without means of escaping, he is going to risk his life to assassinate Ellen, in hopes of stopping her soldiers from pursuing his own troops. As he stood far in front of Ellen, Tigre took down 2 of her horses. Seeing that there's still one enemy left, Ellen brandished her sword and charged at Tigre. She dispatched all the arrows that were shot at her, and as she approached the arrowless Tigre, she ordered him to surrender. The previous night, in the barracks, Zion, a count of the Brune Kingdom, ridiculed Tigre since he was a noble, yet wore leather armor, and took up a bow as his main weapon. He tried to break Tigre's bow, but Tigre snatched it away, knocking Zion down. He was ready to talk down to Tigre even more, when the Count Mashas instructed him to calm down and go have a drink in order to relieve Tigre. While Tigre sat beside Mashas, he heard the other counts talking about the atrocities that Count Thenardia is putting his people through. As Tigre was about to speak up, Mashas stopped him and told him not to listen to them. But suddenly, Mashas shoved his fingers into Tigre's mouth, as the scene becomes blurry. When Tigre awoke, a blonde girl named Limalisha, or just Lim, was standing over him with her sword tip in his mouth. After waking Tigre up in this strange fashion, she tells Tigre that Ellen is waiting for him. Meeting with her, Ellen claimed that she was now holding him captive and warned him that she would have him in her custody for 50 days. If the Brune Kingdom did not make preparations for his ransom, then Tigre would be in her possession. Tigre was not fazed by this, which intrigues Ellen even more. She then takes Tigre to the archery range to test his skills. Tigre has already tried shooting twice. Both times he failed to hit his target due to the crude bow he was given. The soldiers and count of the Zekted Kingdom might be laughing at him, but now he has got the hang of this bow. When he was ready to try again, he noticed that Ellen was about to be assassinated and yelled out for her to duck. However, the war maiden did not flinch. She called upon her sword's name, and when the bandit shot at her, the arrow was stopped by a wind barrier that her sword created. The bandit then tried to flee. Lima ordered the soldiers to capture him, but for Tigre he asked, "Do you want to catch him alive?" She replied that even if they wanted to, they can't. But to prove her wrong, he raised his bow and astonished everyone by shooting an arrow right through the bandit's foot. After this, Ellen was thoroughly impressed by Tigre. The next day, in Ellen's office, she apologized for handing him a faulty bow. She has already found the men that gave him that bow and offered to sentence them to death. Tigre was taken aback by her forwardness. He then pleaded with Ellen to spare their lives and questioned her about why she had taken him into custody. Ellen responded that she had fallen in love with him at first sight, due to the way he used his bow, not for anything else, and that she had only taken him into custody because she found him intriguing, not for ransom. Ellen then told Tigre about the battle a few days ago, which she commented was disappointing. Even though the Brune Kingdom outnumbered her army, 25,000 to 5,000, she managed to kill their leader, Prince Regnas, rather early, which led to the army falling apart. She asked Tigre if she hated her for killing his people, but he claimed that killing in war is a normal occurrence. Even he had shot down some of her men as well. While Ellen was conversing with Tigre, she spotted Lima staring at Tigre, which she mentioned to him that Lima might have a grudge against him for killing her horse, as she was one of the knights escorting Ellen that he shot at, even though Lima denied this. Getting to an important question, Ellen asked Tigre if he would join her army, but he refused since he still had something to protect, which was Alsace, the village that his father passed on to him. Later, Tigre felt bad for Rurik, who had to shave his entire head as punishment for sabotaging Tigre's bow a bit ago. But Rurik was in debt to Tigre, for he had graciously saved his life. They then had lunch together, which Tigre was in love with the food here. After teaching some more bow lessons to the soldiers, Tigre went to look for the baths. As he turned a corner, he was captivated to see a baby dragon. But then, he heard a familiar voice. Turning his head, he faced a bathing Ellen. Embarrassed, he turned away and apologized for walking in on her. But Ellen didn't mind and asked him to come over and wash his body. Tigre refused, arguing that it was not normal for a man and woman to share a bath. But she explained that even though she is a little embarrassed, she is a war maiden, so she must always be ready for battle, and then, out of the blue, she exclaimed that she wanted Tigre. Upon reaching his room, he thought that this was such a friendly kingdom. However, when Rurik knocked on his door to inform him that they had captured a Bruneman. When he came to check, it was Bertrand, one of his subordinates. Bertrand informed Tigre that Count Zion was going to attack Alsace, and he urged Tigre to come back. When Tigre was going to leave Zicte to protect his village, he was halted by Ellen. Tigre requested Ellen to let him through. Episode 2. 3,000 soldiers and 2 dragons were brought to Alsace by Zion on his father's Thenarier's orders. Ellen said that Tigre couldn't do anything on his own, and questioned whether he could overcome an army of 3,000 soldiers. But Tigre insisted that he still wanted to leave. Ellen drew her blade, warning him that he would perish if he tried to flee. Ellen could not understand why Tigre only acted on emotions, not trying to use his wits instead. Understanding what Ellen meant, Tigre bowed his head and asked her to let him borrow some of her troops. Hearing this outrageous request, Ellen laughed joyfully. She told him that Tigre may borrow her soldiers, but all of Alsace would belong to her, and he immediately agreed. With that, Ellen ordered her men to set out and protect Alsace. Tita, Tigre's maid, was alone in Tigre's home. Everyone else has evacuated the village, but she stayed behind because she wanted to greet her master's eventual return. She hugged Tigre's family heirloom bow as she recalled her time spent with Tigre. As soldiers raided Alsace, Zion was informed by the soldiers that nobody was left in the city because they have all fled to the nearby temples and wilderness. Zion was about to launch an attack from the dragons, but he remembered his father's warnings and did not dare to take action. Then, Zion caught sight of Tigre's home. He entered the house and encountered Tita. She urged him to leave, but Zion ripped her clothes with his sword. While pinning her down, he attempted to grope Tita on the balcony. But then, an arrow is shot right through his hand, causing him to scream in pain. Tigre rode a horse over to her and instructed Tita to jump down. As he ran over to catch her, an enemy soldier tripped his horse, but he still managed to leap off and catch Tita. Ellen meanwhile helped by making winds that saved the horse, along with supporting the 2 master and maid down safely. It wasn't until now that Tigre understood that Ellen's sword could control the winds. Tita then cried, saying that she had stayed behind because it was her duty to guard his home and his ancestral bow, with Tigre being proud of her. When Tita asked about who Ellen was, he spotted an enemy shooting an arrow at Tita. In just a fraction of a second, he caught the arrow and fired it right back, killing the soldier. Even though this was rather impressive, Tigre sustained a cut on his hand. Seeing this, Tita tore off some of her skirt to bandage her master. Ellen wondered if he can still fight, and Tigre responded that he is still good to go. Ellen then led her troops to battle. Tigre was about to follow as well, until he realized that his bow was cracked, at which point Tita gave him his ancestral bow. Episode 3. After fending off the initial enemy, Tigre, Ellen, and the rest of the group were planning their next strategy, and they all agreed to adopt the plain of Mosheim as their base of attack. Zion, meanwhile, became highly enraged when the soldiers who lost the battle told him that Ellen had sent reinforcements. Zion dispatched extra troops to scout in order to determine the number of Tigre's troops. Meanwhile, Liam suggested during the discussion that ropes might be beneficial, so Tita indicated that she would lobby for villagers to help gather all the rope they can. Being curious, Tita then asked Ellen about her and Tigre's relationship, and Ellen claimed that Tigre was hers, causing Tita to be embarrassed and flee. Tigre later added that he has a plan that included the number of horses that they have captured from the enemy. Soon there would be a conflict. Ellen inquired if Tigre was afraid. Tigre said that he was, but that won't stop him from seizing victory. With a smile, Ellen raised her sword and ordered the entire army to assault the enemy forces. Ellen used her wind barrier to protect her forces from arrow attacks, while Tigre shot down all the soldiers in his sights. As the 2 armies came into contact, they engaged in combat. But then, due to the presence of a earth dragon on Zion's side, the soldiers on both sides ceased fighting. Ellen was a bit surprised that the enemy was in possession of dragons. Some of Ellen's troops charged at the monster, but were all crushed. Tigre's arrows likewise could not pierce through its tough skin. Zion chuckled at their struggle before Lim's soldiers showed up to assist Ellen in clearing out the surrounding Zion's warriors, so that Ellen could battle the dragon alone. Ellen wielded her sword, causing a gust of wind to surround it and slash it in the direction of the dragon. The sword's impact caused the dragon to be lifted into the air before being split into 2. Ellen's power astounded Tigre because he had never seen it before. As they continued to battle, Rurik told Lim that they were being attacked by 400 more Zion soldiers. Lim ordered her troops to retreat in accordance with the plan, which the soldiers of Zion noticed and pursued. However, they did not anticipate that in the middle of their chase, a rope would abruptly trip their horses, allowing Lim's forces to overwhelm them. Their next phase of the plan commenced. Soldiers informed Zion that Tigre has 2,000 additional warriors attacking their sides, even though those were just decoys. Zion was shocked because the number of troops was 3 times that of his own army. One of the army generals advised Zion to utilize the dragon, but Zion objected, reasoning that if both dragons perished, his life would no longer be safe. After Tigre approached Zion, Zion accused Tigre as a traitor for killing his own people. However, Tigre countered Zion's claim by saying that Zion himself had slain innocent people as well, which was a crime deserving of death. Out of options, Zion challenged Tigre to a duel. Ellen advised Tigre not to accept it, but Tigre nonetheless rode out to do so. When Zion told him that he could use any weapon he wanted, and he'll still be victorious. But Tigre replied that all he needed was his bow. Zion mocked him, stating that that bow couldn't beat him. Tigre wasn't bothered. He fired his first and second arrow at Zion's shield, but they only stick to the shield, which just made Zion more haughty. He stated that Tigre's efforts were useless. When Tigre fired his third arrow, hitting the same spot on the shield, the opponent got bored and charged in Tigre's direction. But Tigre calmly fired his fourth arrow. This time, the arrow penetrated Zion's arm, through the point of the previous 3 arrows. Tigre went to draw his bow once more, when Zion's warriors sprang to his defense, and Zion flew off on the remaining dragon. However, Tigre couldn't let him escape so easily. When he heard a voice telling him to shoot at the dragon, it was his ancestral bow talking to him. He then drew his bow, black and white energy emitting from the arrow's tip. Even Ellen's sword gave Tigre some of his own power. With this newfound power, he shot at the dragon along with Zion, killing them both. Zion perished, allowing Tigre's warriors to triumph and successfully defended Alsace. Episode 4. Tita was cheerfully baking and telling Tigre that breakfast was ready, but when she opened the door to his room, she discovered Ellen holding her sword tip in Tigre's mouth. Due to her fear of him getting wounded, Tita reprimanded Ellen harshly. Tigre's expression went melancholy as Ellen mentioned that she was going to head back to Zektid and inquired about his plans. Later, as they prepared to head back, Lim asked Ellen why she was so concerned about Tigre, and said that she thought Tigre had some amazing potential, and that she didn't hate Tigre. Ellen wanted Lim to take care of him while she is not here. When Tigre was about to go check on the villagers, Tita wanted to come along. Tigre initially refused, but after hearing Tita beg him, he relented. When Ellen returned to her country, she proceeded to the palace to meet the king in person. The king questioned Ellen about why she had taken up arms against a Brune army without asking for his consent. Ellen responded that she had been hired by Tigre, which infuriated the king even more. Ellen was ready to receive her punishment, but Sophie, another war maiden, stepped forward to defend her. After this meeting, Ellen was outside the king's throne room when a blue-haired girl named Ludmilla Laurier said that Ellen was unaware of her boundaries. Ellen retorted that the girl in blue had not grown much. The two began to bicker until Sophie intervened. Ellen thanked Sophie for helping her with the king, and then told Ludmilla to go away after she was questioned by Sophie about why she was still here. Ludmilla muttered, "Poor Tigre for siding with Ellen," before she walked away. Later, Sophie revealed that Ludmilla was associated with Count Thénardier. Ellen was quite surprised to hear this. Meanwhile, Tigre was dreaming about his father when he abruptly awoke and discovered Tita laying next to him. Tita apologized to Tigre without awakening him, but Tigre simply laughed it off and said it was fine. Tigre and Tita returned to their home and discovered Lim and Mashas were eyeing each other. Mashas asked Tigre to explain what was going on, and after hearing Tigre's story, Mashas apologized to Lim, but she replied that it was okay. Mashas inquired as to whether or not Tigre had made any important decisions. Tigre declared that he would go to war with Count Thénardier. After that day, Tigre went out to find allies in order to save their kingdom. He was accompanied by Lim to visit Ellen, and was informed that Alsace would be annexed. Ellen told him that the king had asked her to put the needs of the nation's citizens first. Although Tigre thought it was normal, Lim pointed out that the king didn't care about right or wrong. Instead, he only worried about his own country. Ellen asserted that he could prevail with the assistance of other forces. Suddenly, Ludmilla opened the door and came in. She greeted Tigre, and Ellen told him that he didn't need to be formal with her, since she was uninvited. Ludmilla came here wanting to talk to Tigre, so the two rode on their horses, but Lim and Ellen were close behind them. Tigre asked Ludmilla what she wanted to say, and Ludmilla warned him that she was an ally of Count Thénardier, and that he stood no chance against him. But then, Tigre saw a wire trap up ahead and halted everyone. They all knew that this was a trap of assassins. An arrow was then launched at Tigre, but he evaded it. Tigre shot back at the assassin, killing him against the tree. Another tried to kill Lim, but she blocked and cut him down. Unfortunately, Lim was then bitten by a venomous snake on the chest. Tigre quickly gave medical aid by sucking out the venom. Ellen came over to check on them when 4 more assassins jumped down to finish him off. But Ludmilla utilized her ability to create icebergs to kill them all. Ludmilla criticized Ellen for losing her composure just because of one of her subordinates was injured, calling her a failure as a war maiden. She then rode off to find a doctor for Lim, rendezvousing with them at the Brodnik. Meanwhile, Ellen and Tigre accompanied Lim riding on horseback to the rendezvous. Episode 5. When Ellen and Lim were in the shower, Ellen expressed amazement that Tigre was so quick to aid Lim and apologized to her for not being able to do anything. Ellen also mentioned that she must reward Tigre for this. Tigre, on the other hand, had just entered the bathhouse when he was shocked to see Ludmilla here. Ludmilla took up her weapon against Tigre, but he asked if she could put on some clothes. But like Ellen, she was not embarrassed and then proceeded to knock him out. Later, Tigre, Lim, Ellen, and Ludmilla were walking down the street when they noticed a pot of oat soup. Ludmilla wanted to eat it so bad, but Ellen made fun of her, so she refrained while watching Ellen eat a bowl of soup. She couldn't stand it much longer until Tigre offered her a bowl to apologize for what happened earlier, so she reluctantly accepted it. Ellen then pulled Tigre's collar, scolding him for being friendly to Ludmilla, claiming that she was going to be his opponent. Seeing that Tigre was being bossed around by Ellen, Ludmilla lost her appetite and soon departed. After that day, Ludmilla directed her army to prepare to attack Ellen's forces. Both sides raced to the battlefield, resulting in significant casualties, with both sides retreating. That night, as they discussed their next actions, Ellen stated that she would go to war with Ludmilla. Ellen was furious the next day to see that Ludmilla had retreated to the fortress of Tatra Mountain. Ellen's army tried to attack Ludmilla's fortress, but Ludmilla's warriors were fortified, and Ellen's troops can't withstand the barrage of attacks. Ellen planned to use her powers to sneak behind the enemy lines and wipe them all out, but Lim disagreed, saying that it is too risky, and wanted Tigre to intervene. Ellen insisted that Tigre belonged to her, and that Tigre must obey her orders. Tigre stated that he listened and trusted Ellen, which made her extremely happy, but he didn't want her to risk her life, so Tigre came up with a plan and expected Ellen to follow it. Tigre wore a bear coat, disguising himself as a hunter of a clan nearby, and traveled up the mountain. It has been 3 days and he has ran out of food. Seeing a fox, he shot at it, but when he came over to retrieve it, he unintentionally ran into Ludmilla, who was also hunting. He and Ludmilla then shared a cave on that cold night. Tigre told her his name was Urs, so that she wouldn't be alarmed. Ludmilla was impressed by Urs' archery skills, and wanted to recruit him to her army. Nevertheless, he said that he didn't want to abandon his hometown. Ludmilla then made him a cup of tea, and Tigre complimented on how delicious the tea was, which made Ludmilla smile. He was surprised to see Ludmilla smile since he didn't imagine a cold girl like her could have such a lovely smile. When Urs questioned her about what she was doing here, Ludmilla responded that she was only going out to entertain herself. Urs then told her that if she had anything troubling her, she could tell him, which Ludmilla reveals to Urs her innermost thoughts. In the morning, as the two said their goodbyes, Tigre followed Ludmilla's tracks and arrived at the back entrance of the fortress. He then brought Ellen and her troops to ambush the enemy, where Ellen attempted to open the gates with her powers, but was unable. As a result, she was attacked by soldiers brandishing bows, but Tigre intervened to save her. This was their last chance to take down Ludmilla, so Tigre used the strength of Ellen's sword in conjunction with the might of his bow to fire an arrow that broke through the fortress's gates. Ellen and her soldiers charged in. Episode 6. When Ellen confronted Ludmilla with her attack force, they immediately started fighting. Ludmilla used her powers to send icebergs hurling it towards Ellen, but she destroyed them all with her signature wind attack, causing Ludmilla to dodge. Ludmilla then erects an ice pillar to attack Ellen, but she avoided it. A massive explosion then erupted from the two war maidens clashing, and in its place is a crater where the two were getting back on their feet. When they were about to clash again, a bald man from the assassin group tried to attack them, but Tigre killed him before he had a chance. The battle was then postponed due to the appearance of the assassin. Ludmilla, who now knows that Tigre was hers, took this chance to ask Tigre why he saved her. He responded by saying that it was thanks for letting him drink such wonderful tea. Then, she asked him what he wanted. Tigre said that all he wanted was peace in his nation. Ludmilla respected Tigre's resolve and kindness, so she made the decision to stay out of his conflict with Count Thénardier. A month after the battle with Ludmilla, Tigre maintained a garrison in the region of Territoria that was governed by Thénardier. While Tigre was hearing Lim and Ellen arguing over what their legion's name should be, Rurik came in to inform that there was a fight among the men. When he came, Tigre fired a whistling arrow into the air and inquired as to what the friction was due to. He had not anticipated that the clouds would be the source of the conflict between the soldiers. The next day, after a conference with some leaders, Tigre was resting on some grass near a stream when he noticed a familiar green dragon flying out of the tree and fleeing away. Shortly after, a naked Sophie ran over, slipped, and fell onto Tigre. As they returned to the barracks, Sophie explained that she was a messenger who had been sent here on behalf of the king. She also has a message for Tigre from the Brune Kingdom, saying that his betrayal to the kingdom will be punished immediately, with his title and land be confiscated. Tigre arranged a conference with everyone to discuss a solution as the Navarran knights were en route to his residence. Viscount Augre dispatched peace-preaching messengers, but Roland chased them away, as did Tigre's envoy. In order to combat the Navarre corps, Tigre ordered his own corps to assemble in the Orange Plains. Roland led his men in an attack, slashing down anyone that opposed them. The situation wasn't looking good, so Ellen rode her horse to meet Roland's blade. Roland was impressed by Ellen's strength and inquired about her identity. After telling who she was, Roland was rushed by Ellen's men, but he easily took down all of them, forcing Ellen to clash with him. Roland was too relentless, and she didn't want to use her signature attack against a normal person. When Tigre rode in to save her, Roland charged at Tigre, but he seemingly dodged Roland's slash and shot an arrow into the sky, then swooping in to take Ellen away. Roland tried to give chase, but the arrow Tigre shot came down and killed his horse, shocking him with Tigre's talents as an archer. As they got away, Ellen praised Tigre for saving her, but Tigre didn't respond as he sustained a wound from Roland and later passed out. Roland's troops caught up to them and Ellen didn't know what to do. But then Sophie appeared. She told Ellen to flee and that she would take care of this. After Ellen departed, Sophie activated her staff, which emitted a blinding yellow light.